Okay, welcome back. We're on page 33 talking about durations. So there's one way you can do a duration is go ahead and like put in a thing and then it'll calculate the start and finish. If you're in the automatic mode though, if I go here to this date and say, no, it's not going to be Friday the 13th. Oh, that's pretty cool. I think it's going to be here. Doink. You can go in and make changes to like the beginning task and ending task and those kind of things and kind of manually scoot them over. In this particular case, I told it the duration was going to be, but we can go in and, anyway, you can change these dates after the durations are in is the whole point. Okay. The next thing to talk about is entering some data. Oh, God. So table A29 on page 34, we're supposed to enter the task duration. So I'm gonna do a few of these, not many. Notice that right off the bat they skip over the durations that are for the task summaries because those durations are calculated automatically, right? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go through starting with number 2, and so it's gonna have 1W. And number 3 is going to have 0 and 0 and 1W. And then 0 and then 3 days. And then 0 and then 5 days. Okay, cool. So basically, you go through and do all those things. There's a way you can do a reoccurring task. Let's say I have a task that... like a planning meeting that we happen all the time. So I'm going to go back here, see where it says add task. So I can light me up one of these guys, and one of the things you can do is say I want a reoccurring task. So this is going to be a weekly meeting. And let's say it's only 1 hour long, right? It's just a weekly meeting, 1 hour. But it's weekly and it happens, I don't know, let's say it happens on Monday. Okay? So every week on Monday, and it goes on by whatever. Whatever the end of my project is. I'm gonna change some dates here. We're gonna go through here. Okay. So doink. So now I automatically have these reoccurring tasks all set up. And so they just automatically show up in my calendar. It's kind of cool. Okay, let's continue. Establishing task dependencies on page 38. This is kind of sort of important. One of the things we need to do is we need to expose the predecessors column, which is normally you can't see that. And this is where you type in the task numbers here that tell it this has to happen before that. Those kinds of things, okay? So for example, task number 3 can't happen until after task number 2 is complete. So I'm going to just put a 2 in here and doink. And see what it did? It automatically said, aha! There's a little arrow saying this task has to be, the stakeholder identification takes a week, but has to be, in other words, I can't have the stakeholder register done at all until after that guy is completed. Okay? So once again, there's some things in there like go to task 4, and in task 4, put in 2. Okay, so now I have 2 tasks that are dependent upon that stakeholder identification thing. Kind of cool? Okay. There's another way you can do this, particularly if you have tasks that are kind of linked, that are kind of already in sequence. I could, for example, this is going to mess things up a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and just light up 2 of these guys, okay? So, and if I go here to this thing called link, right here on the task schedule, I can just hit that and it basically automatically just scoots the one at the bottom over. Doing! So that this thing, so the project charter, by the way, I probably need to put that back to what it was. What was it? It was Friday the 13th. Okay, cool. So this automatically just made that guy. So it's the same thing as going here and typing 5. Just, if they're already in order, you could just light them up and just hit the link button. Okay, that's kind of cool. So that's using the link task button. Okay, so figure A36 on page 41 is a list of all the tasks and their predecessors. I am not going to do that, but I'd recommend that you do that. Okay, on page 43, they talk about the Gantt charts, network diagrams, and critical paths. So one of the things we want to do is like find those critical paths, because if you don't already know them, the machine will figure them out for you, which is pretty doggone cool. So I'm going to go to Format, and under this thing for bar styles, I'm going to click on this thing called Critical Task, and I don't have anything set up. What it normally would have done, if you had filled out all the thing, it would mark these things in red as the critical tasks. Yeah, I haven't finished doing all the predecessors, so it's not going to work for me because I'm lazy and I didn't do the homework. Okay, you better do the homework. Okay. Another thing is this. Go back to this task thing. The views. Remember, we had the different types of views. One of them is this. Instead of having that, we have the network diagram. So now we have some dependencies in our network diagram. For example, now we know that the stakeholder identification, stakeholder registry, and stakeholder manager and charter complete, these things are all now related. And so that's the cool way of looking at that. Some people like this. A lot of people like the Gantt chart. I'm going to tell an awful lot of stories about my own personal use of Gantt charts, but I'll tell you one of them now. I was working on this super duper project, and the big wig, big boss, would occasionally stop by my office and say, "Where are we on this project?" And I had printed on the wall, I had access to a engineering plotter, and so instead of printing on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, I could print these things that were 3 foot wide, about 5 feet long. So I printed one of those Gantt charts and had it behind my desk. So the big boss would come in and say, "Where are we?" I'd say, "Well, sir, according to our schedule, we're right here. And so this part is ahead of schedule. This part's below schedule. We're managing these resources." And it made a fantastic communication tool. The bosses always left my office with a smile on their face, even if I was doing poorly, because they knew I had a handle on it. It doesn't matter if you're behind schedule if it looks like and feels like that you're actually managing the project. If you're sitting around going, "Well, I don't know," you got to be able to say with certainty, this part is doing well, this part's not. I've moved some resources from here to account for it, and blah 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 blah. If it sounds like you know what you're talking about, the game is won. Okay. Enough of that. Let's get back to this. So, cost and resource management on page 46. So, a lot of people are kind of used to their own costing system. They don't want to use Microsoft Project for handling real, honest-to-God, billable cost. So, these cost estimates are not really designed for, like, sending a vendor a bill. These are for, like, planning purposes. So, kind of keep that in mind. We typically don't use this for honest-to-God accounting purposes. Okay, all right, here we go. So first thing you need to know is, the difference between fixed and variable cost. Oh, come on, you know what that means. Fixed cost means, I don't mean, here's how much something costs, boom. Not cost per unit. A variable cost would be like labor. How much labor do you want? Well, I want this much labor. Okay, it'll cost you this much. If you want this much labor, it'll cost you that much, right? Variable cost. Okay. So we need to display the cost table. Okay, remember this little table guy here? So if I go here and go to costs, so right now, this is, because we just entered some data, we could go in and put in what the costs are for these, whatever the fixed cost and what the total cost, and if we had variable costs, we could throw in some other things. It's got some cool things to keep track of all that. Again, this is not normally used for accounting. It's used for managerial accounting. Okay. So you could put in your fixed costs so that you know how much your project is overrunning. The next thing is display the resource sheet. So I'm going to go to resources, and again, this is a lot different than the previous version, so you'd have to pay attention. I'm going to slip over to here where it says Team Planner and go down here to the resource sheet. And I don't have any resources, of course. This is where you would put in the things. This is electrical engineering. It's going to be labor. Here's how much. Here's what the standard rate is. Here's what the overtime rate, cost per use. This is where you put in those resources. Now, I don't want to sound like a plug for Microsoft, but the way it kind of sort of works is I could have a group of people, and by the way, the server version of Microsoft Project, here's how we did it. We had all our employees in a corporate email system called Microsoft Exchange, and they all had their calendars up there. And so if they had sick leave or annual leave in their calendar, then when I went to go grab them as a group, so let's say I had 4 electricians, and I go grab those 4 electricians and drop them into my resource pool, then I could get a resource pool of electricians that, all work on something, and it would automatically account for the fact that, Bob's gone for 2 weeks, okay? It automatically figures that out. And so when people made changes to their calendars, like, oh, I got sick and I was gone, it automatically showed up in Microsoft Project. Cool. Okay. Our version doesn't do that, but just bear with me. Okay. So here's where you would type in those things. And again, I recommend, unless you had the server version, you could create these resource pools automatically. I would not do that. I would probably just add a resource one at a time. I could go to Active Directory and pull those people down. Yes, I could. I'm recommending that you not do that. You do it as a group. In other words, create a resource group called electricians, not by name. Okay. When you go to Team Planner, there's another cool one over there that'll allow you to see your resource usage and whether or not you have anything where you have over-allocated resources. So I have a particular resource, like electricians, and I go, oh my goodness, it looks like that second week in January, I got way too much work for the number of electricians I got. I need to do something. I need to either stretch out the amount of time it takes or go hire me some more electricians or do something. Okay, so the Team Planner provides some really cool features for overextended. I just clicked on Team Planner. Of course, I don't have anything in here, but that's beside the point. Okay. Now let's talk about baselines, because we talked about this a bit. I'm going to go back to task. In fact, I'm going to go back to the Gantt chart view. Okay, so baseline. Once I've got this whole thing put together, this might take me a couple days to put this Gantt chart together. Fill in all the data, make sure everything works, print it out, kind of look at it, talk to people, and finally you say, okay, I'm ready to put this in use. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to set the baseline and in other words, now I want you to start tracking from this point on. Okay, and the way you do this is different in this version than it is in the other. So I'm going to go to Project, and under Schedule, there's a thing called Set Baseline. So I'm going to go here and say Set Baseline. Now it basically says, hey, what do you want to call this? Like, I'm just going to call it baseline, I guess you could have multiple ones. You could have one that started off, and then some catastrophe comes. Hurricane comes through, and so you just say, "Oh, look, this whole project's going to be on pause." And so you start off with another baseline and say, "Okay, now that the crisis is over, whatever it is, let's start off with baseline number 2 because we can't be held to the original one because that's just not practical." So this is kind of what this is about. So the entire project, and by the way, nothing much happens. I don't see anything different. What's the big deal? Well, what you've done is you've now set it up so that you can go back to these tasks and you can say this task right here is 25% complete. See this little doodad here? It made it show that these tasks are now ongoing and you've got some progress. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so I'll see you guys again in just a little bit.